Can folks hear me in the back? Is that better? Okay, good. Thank you. So for those of you in university who is taking a science kind of discipline, who wants to major in sciences, whether it's physics or math or biology, chemistry, you can go ahead and put up your hands. Nobody? Who's majoring in journalism? Who's majoring in Instagram? Okay, we'll get to that. I'll tell you why I mentioned Instagram in a moment. So to get you all kind of thinking about the power of National Geographic and the power of what one person can do, I'm going to share a video with you that we love to share with folks. So,
What I want to do from early childhood, but the work has not yet ended. This is just the beginning.
Our ecosystem was under threat, and so I decided then I'm going to do something about it.
The challenge is to be yourself. Forget about what others tell you and just go do it. Women in our society face limitations in education. My goal is to change that.
Fear of taking risks, fear of failure. That's the biggest thing that stops girls from getting into this field.
There were some who would try to discredit my observations because I was a young, untrained girl.
I get to decide what I can and cannot do. We are pushing the boundaries for future generations.
For us to be down there together as three strong women achieving what we set out to do, it's not something else we forget.
It's important to recognize the women that have paved the way for us today.
When students see people that look like them, it gives them that motivation that they need in order to say, you know what, I can go ahead and do this too.
When you educate a girl, you educate the world.
We cannot get to the best possible exploration if we don't have the totality of people in the room to contribute to the conversation.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Yeah? Okay. So that's some of the things that we like to do. Every woman that you saw in there is what we call an explorer. And National Geographic gives them funding for that. So I will explain what explorers are and how you can maybe become one as well towards the end. Let me put this back up. So there was one woman at the very beginning of the video. Does anybody know who she is? Did anyone recognize her?
Biologist.
No, if I say the name Jane Goodall, does that mean anything to anybody? Jane Goodall? You know Jane Goodall? Great. Can you tell us a little bit about what you know about her?
She worked with apes basically, and she got closer with them, and she traveled around Africa, I think, with being inspired by her dad.
That's excellent. Let me give you a magazine for that. That was amazing. So yes, Jane Goodall is one of our explorers. She received a lot of money from National Geographic to go into Africa and to study the behavior of apes and monkeys and chimpanzees. We know a lot about primatology just from her and everything that she did. But she didn't have a PhD. She didn't even have a degree from university. It was just something that she really felt passionate about and she wanted to do. So let me tell you a little bit about my life and how I got to be here. So I'm going to refer to this map quite a bit, and let's just orient ourselves. Here we are right at this moment. And this is where I'm from. So I'm originally from Toronto in Canada. It's very cold. We don't have days like you do here. But this is where I got started with my work. So this is the Philippines here. So very close to you guys. And I got started with this animal. Anyone know what this is?
Seahorses.
Yeah, seahorses. So what's probably the coolest fact about seahorses?
the male also can give birth.
Yeah, that's right. So the male is actually, would you pass this down? Can you guys help me here? Yeah. So the male is the one that carries the eggs, which is amazing. And when you see a pregnant seahorse, they carry their eggs on the outside, and that's how you know it's a male. So what does this have to do with anything? Well, seahorses are amazing creatures. So what I did in the Philippines was I worked with an organization called Project Seahorse. And their whole mantra is really to protect seahorses. But how do you do that? How do you do that in places where people don't know that seahorses are threatened or endangered? And the more you take a seahorse, the more you can sell it on the black market, and the more money you can make and then feed your children. So the whole program was about going to local communities, telling them about the importance of seahorses, and how special they are, and how we want to conserve biodiversity. And we hired seahorse fishermen who would normally sell seahorses on the black market. We hired them to help us in our diving projects to locate seahorses, and so we could measure them, we could figure out if they're pregnant or not, and we could assess their overall health. But very importantly was also the habitat that the seahorses lived in. So they live on coral, and if there's no coral, there's no seahorse. And if there's no coral, then there's not much left around either for other fish to eat and for algae to grow on. So we enable the local communities to set up protected areas, and we showed them the value of it. We said, if you protect this part right here, the areas next to it will benefit from the fish coming back in these protected areas, and they will flow into the areas where you're allowed to fish. So we had no fishing zones and fishing zones. And we did all this with local communities. There were only 3 of us on this project at the time. Only 3 of us diving every single day, looking for seahorses, assessing the health of the coral. But it was really the local communities that we were working with to help us out. So that's how I got my started. And this was immediately after my undergrad. I didn't know what else I wanted to do. I thought I was going to be a doctor. My parents thought I was going to be a lawyer. I wanted nothing to do with that. I was bored with humans. I was like, animals are the way to go. So from there, then I came back to Canada, and I worked in Northern Ontario. And in Northern Ontario, they had this problem where black bears, these guys, are hunted. And so they're hunted in the spring and they're hunted in the fall. Well, the population of black bears wasn't doing very well, so the government decided to cancel the spring bear hunt altogether. And so what happened was there were a lot of bears when they hibernate, so they sleep in the winter. It's very cold. So they sleep in the winter, and when they wake up in the springtime, they're looking for food, and they're desperate for food. And as human development kind of grows in their areas, when they wake up, they're like, what happened to my trees? Where am I supposed to get my food? So they walk into communities, and they eat things like if people have a barbecue, they don't clean the barbecue, they leave the meat. Well, it's very delicious to a bear, so a bear will go to the barbecue and eat it. Or sometimes people feed their dogs outside. Well, if you're a bear, you've lost your tree, you've lost your den, okay, I'm gonna go eat the dog food. So you start to have these problems between humans and bears. Another thing they do is many people love birds. Who here love birds? They're beautiful, they're pretty, they're colorful. So a lot of people like to feed birds. So you have bird feeders, which is very sweet, like there's like nuts and honey and everything delicious. Well, that's also very attractive to black bears. So these guys started to get in a lot of trouble. So they were walking through people's homes, they were walking through people's backyards, causing a lot of damage. And so my job became to trap these black bears and take them somewhere else. And take them somewhere else where it was more protected, there was less possibility of humans being around, and they could live out their lives. So I became a bear biologist. And then from there, I thought, well, okay, the world is limited if I only stay on land. And I had just come from the Philippines, and I was still thinking about water and marine environments and how do we protect places where people aren't, but they really need to use those resources. So I decided to do my master's focusing on these guys. So this is the North Atlantic right whale. There are only about 300 of them left. Their primary threat are collisions with, those big tankers that you see in the waters bringing in a bunch of materials, like furniture and food, those big ones. So their primary threat is colliding with big vessels. So one of the main problems is that when the whales get scared, they will hover just beneath the surface of the water. So if you're a person on one of those big vessels and you're looking out and you're trying to see whales so you can alert the captain to go around them, well, you can't really see them because the whales are just beneath the surface of the water. So that's why they get hit. And they get hit and they get dragged along for a long time. Some of them drown because they can't go back up. And some of them are found on the shore with these big strikes on their bodies. And that's how we know that they were hit by a large shipping vessel. So my master's project was looking at where is that interaction between the vessels and the whales, and why is that happening? So there was a bunch of us, and we would go out and we would see where the whales were, and we realized that exactly where the shipping lane is a whale feeding ground. So the whales are there for food, and the shipping vessels are bringing food to humans. So we had to convince the International Maritime Organization, and we had to convince the Government of Canada and a bunch of different organizations, like oil tankers and food distributors, to move over an entire shipping lane to protect the feeding grounds of the whales. And it actually worked. And that's probably one of the few times that you hear about somebody's master's project actually working to do something in real life. So I was really proud of that. So after that, I went back to Ontario. So I was working on the east coast of Canada for that. And then I went back to Ontario, and I decided to do my PhD. And I was doing my PhD on black bears as well. And we were looking at a very similar type of project up in northern Canada, looking at black bears, where they go in relation to a new hydro dam development. At the same time, though, there was a company that needed Canadian guides who knew about bears to work with these guys, so to work with polar bears. So for 8 years, I was a guide on polar bear trips. So this meant taking a lot of people up to northern Canada. We would be in these small vehicles, and we would go out on military trails in northern Canada, where the polar bears are also gathering. So instead of going to the zoo and seeing bears in a zoo in cages, we put humans in the cages, and the cages just happened to have wheels so that you could go around and then see the bears. So I did that for 8 years, which led to me also being able to guide in different places. Because I had whale experience, because I had bear experience, I was then able to go kind of around the world, and I was able to guide for different animals with the same kinds of people who want to know about animals, they want to know about conservation, they want to know how to protect different lands, and they want to know how to help local communities. So I continued guiding in northern Ontario, in northern Canada, which is here. Can you see my cursor? I don't know. And then I guided in China. I guided for panda bear trips as well as Asiatic black bear trips. Then I guided in Mongolia for a snow leopard trip. We actually saw one after 28 days of searching. And I also worked in Kenya. And in Kenya, I worked with an anti-poaching unit who was trying to understand why they were having so many poachers coming in to take away their rhinos. And so as you probably all know, rhino horn is quite valuable for furniture, for medicine. Even though it's not really worth anything, rhino horn is pretty much the same material that we have in our nails. So it doesn't make any sense for somebody to go take a rhino horn. And I was actually very impressed. A couple days ago, on my way here, or actually to the embassy, you have a great sign outside the Ministry of Health that says about rhinos. Has anyone seen that sign? Have you seen that sign? Do you remember what it says?
Something about 15 years in prison.
Yes. So I saw that this kind of rhino is the same material as your nails, and it's not for many. It doesn't make sense to have in medicine. I'm actually a traditional medicine doctor, and I saw a lot of remedies that they have rhino horn inside it, and it's completely insane. I have to say that.
Thank you for showing that. Yeah, let me give you one of these notebooks. You can't go home without one. There you go. That's right. So the main route for rhino horn is from Africa to Southeast Asia. a lot of China, like a lot of products end up on the streets of China. But as our friend over here mentioned, it's completely insane. So that brought me to National Geographic. So all my work prior, all my guiding work, my school work, I wasn't yet with National Geographic. What took me to National Geographic was a program where they're looking to implement scientific expeditions. So they needed somebody with a science background, but they also needed somebody with an expedition background. And I'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. I just want to introduce you a little bit more to National Geographic. So our main logo is that yellow rectangle. Can anyone guess what that could possibly mean? Why would we choose a rectangle? I think I just heard the answer.
A window?
Yes, a window. A window, exactly. It's a window to the world.
I can't.
Oh, you haven't already? Okay, good. Yes, it's the window to the world. So we are trying to bring people inside our magazine to learn outwards, to learn about the world outside. So this is our mission. The National Geographic Society, we use the power of science, exploration, education, and storytelling to illuminate the wonder of the world, to find critical challenges, and catalyze action to protect our planet. And so we do that with many different ways, and we measure our impact almost daily, whether it's how many hits we have on Instagram, how many people have read an article, how many people even mention Nat Geo or put that in a Twitter handle. So we're all striving for a planet in balance. That's really ultimately what we're trying to get. So our vision. We may never achieve it, but it's something that we're working towards all the time. It's that vision of sustainability. It's that vision of leaving the world hopefully in a better place for the next generation. That's really what we're trying to achieve. So let me take you back to 1888. That's when National Geographic was first established. So they're about 33 of Washington, D.C.'s top thought leader. So the person with the most scientific credentials, the most intelligent, the most creative, the person willing to kind of take a chance and go outside and do something that nobody's ever done. That's who was invited to a meeting in 1888 in Washington, D.C. I still work in that building that meeting was held. We have a beautiful campus downtown. You're all welcome to come see us. We have a museum as well. But I'll mention to you, so this is the founder of National Geographic, or at least the person who has started it. His name was Gardner Hubbard. And his son-in-law is this man here. So his son-in-law is Alexander Graham Bell. Does anybody recognize that name? Yeah, the telephone. Yeah. There's a lot of theories. So Alexander Graham Bell's wife was deaf. There's a lot of theories that she's actually the one who invented the telephone. But at that time, since they couldn't talk about women inventors, he took the credit for it. But it's just a theory. I'm not sure if it's ever been proven. But it's interesting to note that his wife was deaf. So the reason why I mentioned him and not the founder, Mr. Hubbard, is because Alexander Graham Bell was the first one that had that vision of, hey, let's take the magazine and make it something that everybody would want to read. Like everybody wants to pick up and look into the window of the world. So he was the first person to say, hey, let's put photographs in the magazine. Before that, it was just kind of like a scientific journal. You pick it up and you probably go to sleep with it. But if you flip through our magazine now, there's some really amazing pictures. And if you become a Nat Geo photographer, you're known around the world as like, you have made it. You have done it. So here's our method. So we explore and we undertake research. We hope to educate and inspire everyone who picks up our magazine or pays attention to one of our documentaries. We hope that you are then empowered to have your own ideas or to think of some creative solutions that maybe we hadn't before. And all that together, hopefully we will have some demonstrable impact. So let's watch a video about what impact means to us. Let's hope this works. Here we go.
Our world is changing. Every living thing depends on a healthy planet. At National Geographic, we're committed to exploring and protecting the living Earth.
Human encroachment, poaching, habitat destruction. I'm going to do something about it.
The impact we're making is greater than ever before.
Yeah, thank you. Makes me really, really happy to find this lion alive. It's nice to see her still around.
Our goal is to see the 20 most pristine places in the ocean protected by 2020.
The impact of this project is protecting this landscape for future generations.
I've devoted my life to documenting every species in captivity to inspire people to care and help protect these animals.
I cross borders, I cross languages, I cross countries, I cross cultures, and underneath it all, there's a commonality.
We're building a community of change makers and empowering the next generation of scientists and explorers.
My class is thinking of themselves as explorers, as well as problem solvers.
At Photocamp, what I took away with me was that my story is so important to other people.
That means Rishi is our winner because Lake Kivu.
With your support, we're going even further. Awarding more grants, protecting wildlife and wild places, preserving our changing planet, investigating our human journey, and investing in more diverse explorers, educators, and storytellers around the world. Together, we're creating a planet in balance and a healthier future for us all. Help make an impact with us at natgeo.org.
We just love those videos. It inspires everybody, right? You all feel like you want to go outside and explore. So let's talk a little bit about our assets. And the reason why I put this up is because I want to explain that National Geographic is actually two companies. So we have National Geographic Society, and we have National Geographic Partners. And the partners are the ones who are really invested in seeing what drives behavior, what inspires people. So they're the ones that keep the magazine going. They're the ones with the National Geographic Channel. They're the ones with the documentaries. They're the ones that really invest heavily in different technologies for media innovation. They're the ones who monitor the Instagram account, Facebook, all that. So that's the partner side. So they're the ones really making the money. And we, or myself, I'm on the society side, which is all about science and exploration. So the society side is the one driving the stories. We're the ones looking for that new species discovery or that new ecosystem to look at, or maybe we're sending a team down to the Amazon or up Everest, which I'll talk about again. So that's kind of that side, the science and exploration side. That's also the side that gives grants. And it's the products of the exploration that then funnels into these different types of assets. So let me switch a little bit and explain to you a little bit more about the program that I'm specifically on. So I'm on a program that's funded by Rolex, which is very interesting. It's interesting that they're still very invested in science. They don't just do tennis players. They also do science, which is nice. They're very interested in measuring the change in the world and really thinking about different solutions and what can they do, what maybe metric can they help design in order to really understand the change that our world is undergoing. So the program that I work on is called Life at the Extremes. And this is all about understanding climate change in different extreme environments. So the first one that we looked at was mountains. Anyone name probably the biggest, tallest, most well-known popular mountain? Yeah, Everest. So this is us on our way to Everest. This is actually in January. You can tell I'm quite short versus the other team members. That was a running joke throughout the whole expedition. So here we are in January, and we are doing a scouting expedition to see what we can do in April and May. So in April and May, this is where I lived. Right there. That's my tent. So this is base camp. So what we did for this expedition was we had a team of about 46 people. I was responsible for their safety and security, as well as making sure that they were actually doing the science projects that we wanted them to do. So what were they? There were 5 different projects. Number 1 was mapping. We wanted the highest resolution, the best maps that you could possibly produce of this whole area. This is the Khumbu Glacier that you're looking at. probably one of the most important that you can imagine in the world. This whole watershed that's attached to Mount Everest, it sends water down to over 1 billion people. So really important to keep this going and understand any changes that could occur because it could cause a lot of problems downstream. So that was mapping. Then we also had a whole geology team. And what they were looking at was, if you were to take some of these rocks that are in front of the glacier, so kind of like down here, if you were to take those rocks, and just like humans, when we burn, our skin, changes color. And if we stayed out in the sun the whole time, we get redder and redder. Very similar concept to a rock. A rock can also experience sunburn. And so if you can measure the amount of burn on a rock, you can figure out how long was it there exposed to the sun. And before, how long did it have glaciers covering it? So through that change, we can measure how much the glacier has receded and in what years. So we can see the rate with which the glacier is melting, which is important for the future, so that we know how much we're going to have and for how long. So that was geology. Then we had a glaciology team. So we had a lot of glacier scientists who were coming over here, and they were taking ice core samples. So we had a few at base camp, and then we also had a team go up all the way up to the balcony, which is hard to see, but it's kind of up here. So you walk through the glacier, up through camp 1, 2, 3, 4, and then up to the balcony over here. And they were able to take 10 meters of a core sample, so basically standing on the glacier and drilling straight down 10 meters worth. So those samples, with the ice core samples, will be analyzed for atmospheric gas content. So we can see the change in time when those the gas composition has changed, and we can measure that with the date of kind of like rings on a tree. You can age a tree that way, very similar to an ice core sample. So that was the glaciology team. Then we had a biology team come. So the biology team was trying to see where is the extent of life. So when I was living at base camp, there was no life. I think maybe we saw 2 birds, maybe. I think I saw a fly, and the fly was really annoying, so everybody saw the fly. But no mosquitoes, no plants, no lichen, no algae, just people and yaks. The yaks helped us transport the equipment all the way up. But yeah, so that's really about it at base camp. So the biology team was looking for what's the highest record of an insect or a bird or anything they could possibly find. So they would collect scat samples, so feces of animals, mammals preferably. They would also take some water samples. So with water samples, you can do something really cool called eDNA. And what that means is you're looking at the water, you're looking for the remnants, like the shedding of a skin, for example, of an animal that may have been there in the water. So what fish are around that may have shed their scales or shed their, even their fecal matter. And we can test for genetic analyses in these water samples to see what kind of life is there in the lakes. So they were going to the highest possible lakes we could find to take water samples. So they were also looking for insects. It's possible they found some records of species at altitudes that had never been seen before. We're still confirming those, but it's pretty exciting. It's exciting to know how the Earth is adapting to its changing climate and how life is able to push those boundaries a little bit more. And we just need to assess if that's good or bad. If it's bad, what are we going to do? How are we going to mitigate that? And if it's good, again, also, what do we do with that knowledge, and what kind of solutions to climate change can we think of with that? So let's see, I've covered mapping, geology, glaciology, biology. What am I missing? Is it cartography? Yeah, and cartography. So very similar to mapping, but also just kind of taking that high resolution. We had helicopters that were flying all the way above the Khumbu Glacier, and they were just trying to map out the changing, these are called penitentes, the parts that kind of stick up from the glacier. So they were trying to measure the level of change of those on a daily rate. And then the last one, is meteorology. So probably the coolest thing that we did was we installed 5 weather stations up along from base camp all the way to the top, and another one in a village called Fortse. So Fortse is where a lot of the Sherpa community live. So Sherpas are the people that are really adapted to high altitude environments. And they were able to help us go all the way up to the balcony and come back down safely. So we have weather stations along the way, and the weather stations are collecting atmospheric data, and they're feeding into our current models to make them a lot better. So we're really trying to understand what are the highest winds, what are the most extreme temperatures, and how is that changing across time. And this, of course, will hopefully all funnel into different solutions. So that's Life at the Extremes. That's what I do. I'm Director of Expeditions for Life at the Extremes. So that was mountains. Our next expedition set will be for rainforests. So we're looking now probably somewhere in South America. We're going to do some tropical rainforest analyses, and very similar to what we did on the mountains is understanding the role of tropical forests in climate change. After that, we're going to do another set of expeditions in the oceans. So those are the 3 thematic areas that we have for now. And if you go to our website and you go down here, you can see the Extreme Expedition Everest, and you can read all about that. So another part of our website that I want to draw your attention to, because it's very applicable to you, is this part right here. So the funding opportunities. So what could this mean for everyone here? If you aspire to be some kind of explorer, if you have an idea that you're pretty sure nobody else has thought of and you think it's a great idea, we have some funding opportunities for you. So we fund grants. Again, this is the society side. We have 3 kinds of grants. We have the early career grants, which I'll talk a lot about here, because I think most of you could probably apply for that. We have the exploration grants, which are for people who are kind of like your professors in university. They should apply for exploration grants. And then we also have very specific requests for proposals, and these change all the time. So I would highly encourage you to always go to our website and check out the RFPs, because there might be something that's applicable to you. So let's talk a little bit more about early career grants. So it gives you the opportunity to lead a project. So you, and only you can have team members, but you become a young explorer. You become part of the National Geographic family, and it's a title that you never leave. So once you become a young explorer, 30 years from now, you're still called a young explorer, which is cool. So the grant money is anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000. It's average about $5,000, but we do fund projects up to $10,000. These are for projects for 1 year or less. So you really have to have like a scientific question and a methodology that you can accomplish in just 1 year. It can be part of your PhD, it can be part of your master's, it can be part of your honors or undergrad. But it just has to be 1 year. The minimum age is 18 to apply. You're definitely not required to have any kind of advanced degree. You don't need an undergrad yet. You don't need a master's or a PhD yet. If you have a PhD already and you're a recent grad within 5 years, you're also eligible to apply for that. And we have this rolling opportunity, but we do have deadlines every 6 months. So we give out grants every 6 months. I'll stop right here. Are there any questions about early career grants? No, okay. I want to make sure. They are competitive. I should mention that. We do look for the best and the brightest, and the most creative, the most innovative. So you definitely have to put your best foot forward. So the 5 different areas that we love to fund are conservation. So if you're thinking about, let's say, a protected area, or you think that there's some really special maybe place in the ocean that you're thinking about that should have its mark on the map, that would definitely fall under conservation. We have education grants, which are quite exciting. We don't have many people apply for those, so if you're in that education field and you're doing something to maybe empower a local community, or there's a certain group of people that you want to empower, like women in a certain maybe remote place, education would be where you'd fall. For research, this is the standard research. You can't get more standard than this. This is your classic, I have a hypothesis, I have a null hypothesis, I want to test this methodology, and here are my results. So very classic scientific research. Then we have storytelling. And this is really amazing. Some of the storytelling explorers out there are just amazing. Even just with a simple iPhone, the things that they have done, they just blow me away. I don't know how they do it. But storytelling could be anything. It could be through an iPhone video. It could be through Sony A7 video. It could be a poster. It could be a book. It could be anything you can possibly imagine that could get a story across in a really effective way. So that would be storytelling. And then technology. Technology, also a lot of fun. This is an opportunity to think about some kind of technology solution, or if you want to design some kind of piece of technology, I'll certainly consider that. I will mention though that an app doesn't fall under technology. It's not innovative enough, it's not creative enough, but if an app is along with like something else, then it could fall under technology grants. So just to kind of give an overview of who our explorers are, they are scientists out there, they're conservationists, teachers, photographers, geographers, journalists, technologists, anything you can possibly imagine. If it's creative and innovative and amazing, we want the National Geographic logo around it. So there are over 50 different grants that I found in our system that have been specific to Vietnam. These are just the ones in the last year. So the first one has to do with reduction of plastic waste in the ocean. That was an education grant. The second one was it was an anthropology grant. So again, archaeologists, anthropologists, Indiana Jones type. We want to fund. The third one was a wildlife grant. That's about conserving the Sunda pangolins. The fourth one here is also a wildlife one, looking at the muntjacs in Nui National Park. And then the last one was a behavior change one. So understanding motivations for hunting sun bears in Southeast Asia. So I just wanted to make sure you all had this grant's email address up there. So grantsinfo@ngs.org. If you have any questions at all about any type of grant, feel free to drop them a line. There's an amazing team behind the grants team. I used to work in grants before I joined Life with Extremes. It's just a fantastic group of people. So you will get your question answered. And then I want to leave time for some questions, but I also want to make sure you have my email. So that's my email. If you have any questions at all about anything that we do, if you want to stay in touch, feel free to drop me a line. So I'm happy to take questions. I know a lot of you have your phones up about anything, whether it's a grant or an expedition or life at base camp. I'm happy to take questions. It's also really hot in here. Anyone else? Here we go. Good. My notebook's so far. So, are there any questions? And is there a microphone? That... Okay. So, who wants to be an explorer? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, 5 in the back. That's it. Really?
No.
Wow. All right. Well, I got 5 notebooks.